The moment the bullet cracked the windshield of Victor's sleek black car, he slammed the brakes, swerving sharply. His heart thundered in his chest as the vehicle spun to a halt in the middle of the deserted bridge. Headlights illuminated a man standing just a few yards ahead, his face obscured by shadows, a smoking pistol in his hand. "Get out now," the stranger barked, his voice cold and commanding. Victor glanced at the glove compartment, where his own firearm lay hidden. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple as he calculated his odds. This wasn't random. Someone wanted him cornered. Instead of complying, Victor kicked the door open, stepping out with an icy glare. "You've got guts showing up like this. Who sent you?" The man chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "You're out of your league, Victor. This isn't about you anymore. It's about the empire your family built. You're just collateral." Victor's jaw tightened. "If you think I'll let you take it, you're more delusional than I thought." Before the man could reply, a flash of headlights blazed from behind, and tires screeched as a second car sped toward them. Victor instinctively dove to the ground as gunfire erupted, shattering the tense silence of the night. From the chaos, a woman's voice shouted, "Victor, get in." It was Mira, her unmistakable fiery tone cutting through the noise. Victor didn't think twice. Scrambling to his feet, he bolted toward the car as bullets whizzed past. Mira threw the car into reverse the moment he slammed the door shut. "What the hell are you doing here?" Victor growled, clutching his chest as Mira gunned the engine. "Saving your ungrateful life," she snapped, veering sharply to avoid another round of gunfire. "Do you want to argue? Or should we focus on surviving the night?" Victor sank back into the seat, his adrenaline spiking as the pursuing car closed in. Tires screeched, and the unmistakable roar of engines filled the air as Mira took a sharp turn down an alleyway. Her movements were deliberate, precise, as though she'd navigated these streets under pressure before. "This isn't a random attack," Victor muttered, his mind racing to connect the dots. "They knew where I'd be." "No kidding," Mira shot back, throwing the car into another sharp turn. "Care to explain why you're suddenly on every hitman's radar?" Victor clenched his fists. The answer was obvious, but admitting it aloud was another matter. His father's empire, an intricate web of powerful allies, dangerous enemies, and dark secrets, was finally starting to collapse. And now, someone was using him as a pawn to bring it all crashing down. Myra's gaze flicked to him for a split second. "Who betrayed you?" Victor's silence was damning. "You don't know, do you?" Mira pressed. "You're in deeper than I thought." "Just drive," Victor growled. But deep down, he knew she was right. Trust was a currency he'd spent recklessly, and now he was paying the price. As they sped out of the city, the oppressive weight of their situation settled over them. The night was far from over, and the fight for survival had only just begun. The car roared down the desolate highway, the city lights shrinking into the distance behind them. Myra's knuckles were white as she gripped the wheel, her sharp eyes scanning the road for any signs of pursuit. Victor sat rigid beside her, his mind churning as he tried to piece together who could have orchestrated such a brazen ambush. "You know this won't stop, right?" Mira broke the silence, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "If they've gone this far, they're not backing off until you're in the ground, or worse." Victor leaned his head back against the seat, letting out a slow, frustrated breath. "You think I don't know that? This is bigger than me now. They're after everything my father built. And tearing you apart is just their first step," Mira snapped. "You're walking around like some untouchable prince, and now it's finally catching up to you." Victor's head turned sharply, his dark eyes narrowing. "I didn't ask for your lecture. You weren't supposed to be involved in this." Mira gave a bitter laugh, her foot pressing harder on the gas. "Too late for that now. You think I came to your rescue for fun? I know exactly what you're up against. And if I hadn't shown up when I did, you'd already be dead." Victor clenched his jaw, his anger simmering. Mira had a point, but he couldn't admit it, not here, not now. "What do you know?" he asked finally, his voice low. "Enough," Mira said grimly, keeping her eyes on the road. "Your father's enemies are more than just corporate sharks. They're ruthless. If they're coming after you, they've got resources, connections, and a motive. Whoever planned this is playing the long game, and you're just the opening move. Victor let her words sink in, his mind racing back to recent events. The deals he'd overseen, the people he'd crossed, the secrets he'd uncovered. It was all connected. But the question was, who had the power to set all of this in motion? Pull over, Victor said suddenly, his tone decisive. Mira shot him a look. What? Pull over, he repeated, more urgently this time. Mira frowned but complied, veering the car off the highway and into a secluded clearing. The engine hummed as she killed the lights, plunging them into darkness. Victor stepped out, the cool night air hitting him like a slap. He paced in front of the car, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Mira leaned against the driver's door, her arms crossed, watching him with a mix of curiosity and irritation. What's your plan, genius? She asked dryly. Or are we just waiting for them to find us? Victor stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression resolute. We can't keep running. If we don't figure out who's behind this and why, they'll hunt me down no matter where I go. Mira tilted her head. And how exactly do you plan to do that? March up to your enemies and ask them to confess. Victor smirked, though there was no humor in it. Not exactly. I know someone who can help. Mira arched a brow. And this someone, can they be trusted? She doesn't trust anyone, Victor said, his voice softening slightly. Which is why I know she's good at what she does. Mira's expression turned skeptical. You're talking about Isabella, aren't you? Victor didn't answer immediately, but his silence was enough. Mira let out a low whistle. You're really desperate if you're going to her. You know she's got a reputation for selling secrets to the highest bidder, right? She owes me, Victor said firmly, though there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Mira shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. Fine, let's go meet your dangerous little contact. But if this backfires, I'm not sticking around to clean up the mess. Victor climbed back into the car, determination etched across his face. It won't backfire. She'll help us. She has to. As Mira started the engine, her gaze lingered on Victor for a moment longer. You'd better hope you're right, she murmured. Hours later, they pulled up to a remote industrial district on the outskirts of the city. The warehouse stood like a shadowy sentinel, its cracked windows and rusted metal exterior hiding whatever secrets lay within. This is her place? Mira asked, cutting the engine. Not exactly subtle. She's not one for appearances, Victor replied, stepping out of the car. As they approached the heavy steel door, Victor hesitated before knocking 3 times in a distinct rhythm. A long pause followed, and Mira shifted uncomfortably. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a woman with sharp features and piercing gray eyes. She wore a sleek black jacket, her stance relaxed but alert. Victor, Isabella said coolly, her gaze flicking to Mira. And a friend. How charming. Can we talk? Victor asked, his tone brisk. Isabella smirked. You're always straight to the point. Come in. The inside of the warehouse was a labyrinth of monitors, papers, and equipment. Mira glanced around, her unease growing with each passing second. So, Isabella began, perching on the edge of a cluttered desk. What brings you here? Business? Or has your perfect little world finally started crumbling? Victor's eyes darkened. I need information. Someone's targeting me. They set up an ambush tonight. Isabella raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. And you think I can tell you who? I know you can, Victor said, his voice steady. Isabella leaned back, crossing her arms. This'll cost you. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. I'm not here to bargain. You owe me. For a moment, Isabella said nothing, her calculating gaze locking on Victor. Finally, she sighed. Fine, I'll look into it. But if I find something big, you're going to owe me more than you're comfortable with. Victor didn't flinch. Just tell me who's behind this. Isabella smirked, her fingers flying across a nearby keyboard as she pulled up a series of encrypted files. Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes. The screen illuminated a name that made Victor's blood run cold. Victor's chest tightened as he stared at the name flashing across the screen. Darius Langford. The air in the warehouse grew heavier. Mira leaned forward, her brows knitting together. Darius Langford? As in your father's right-hand man. Victor nodded slowly, his fists clenching at his sides. He was more than that. He was practically family. My father trusted him with everything. Isabella snorted, swiveling in her chair. Well, looks like he didn't return the favor. Darius has been busy. His name's been tied to at least 3 hostile takeovers in the last 6 months. And I'm betting your empire is next. Victor's jaw tightened. The betrayal stung deeper than any bullet ever could. Do you have proof he's behind the ambush? Isabella leaned back, smirking. Not yet, but I've got a lead. Turns out, your old buddy Darius has been working with some interesting characters lately. Mercenaries, hackers, you name it. He's building an army, Victor. And he's targeting you for a reason. Victor's voice was ice cold. What reason? Isabella shrugged. That's for you to figure out. All I know is he's putting a lot of money and effort into this. My guess? It's personal. Mira crossed her arms, her voice laced with skepticism. And you're just giving us this information out of the kindness of your heart? Isabella smirked. Let's just say, if Darius takes Victor down, the ripple effects could hurt some of my other clients. I'm invested in keeping him alive. For now, Victor stepped forward, his tone sharp. Where can I find him? That's where it gets tricky, Isabella replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard again. Darius has gone underground. No official addresses, no known properties under his name. But, she paused, a flicker of intrigue crossing her face. He's hosting a private event tomorrow night. Big names, high stakes. If he's making a move, it'll start there. Victor's eyes narrowed. Where? Isabella's grin turned sly. The Altara Club. High-end. Members only. You're not getting in without an invitation. Or a very good disguise. Mira scoffed. Great. So we're crashing a party hosted by the guy trying to kill you. What could possibly go wrong? Victor ignored her sarcasm, his mind already working through the plan. I'll need access to the guest list, a layout of the club, and a way to get in unnoticed. Isabella laughed, shaking her head. You don't ask for much, do you? Fine. I'll get you what you need. But remember, you owe me for this. Victor's gaze hardened. If I make it out alive, you'll get your payment. By the time they left the warehouse, the night had deepened into an eerie stillness. Mira lit a cigarette as they walked back to the car, the orange glow briefly illuminating her face. You're really going through with this, aren't you? She asked, exhaling a plume of smoke. Victor opened the car door but paused, his expression unreadable. I don't have a choice. If Darius is behind this, he's not stopping until I'm out of the way. For good. Mira leaned against the car, studying him carefully. You know he's not just going after you. If you push him, he'll target everyone close to you. Victor's eyes flicked to hers, dark and unyielding. That's why I'm going to end this before he gets the chance. Mira shook her head, a bitter smile playing on her lips. You always did have a hero complex. Victor didn't respond. Instead, he climbed into the car, his mind already on what lay ahead. The Altara Club was a fortress disguised as a luxury venue. Its sleek, modern exterior was all glass and chrome, glowing softly under the city lights. Security was tight, with guards stationed at every entrance and surveillance cameras covering every angle. Victor adjusted the cufflinks on his tailored suit, the borrowed outfit fitting him like a second skin. Mira, dressed in a slinky black gown, adjusted the strap of her concealed holster. You sure this is going to work? She asked, her voice low as they approached the entrance. Victor gave a curt nod. It has to. The plan was simple in theory. Blend in, gather intel, and confront Darius without tipping off his security. In practice, it was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. They flashed their forged invitations to the bouncer, who barely glanced at them before ushering them inside. The interior was even more opulent than Victor had imagined. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and walls lined with priceless art. The air buzzed with the low hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. Victor scanned the room, his eyes landing on the man at the center of it all. Darius Langford. He hadn't changed much. His graying hair was slicked back, his tailored suit radiating power and control. He was laughing with a group of men, each one more dangerous looking than the last. Victor's blood boiled, but he forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't afford to blow their cover, not yet. Mira leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. There he is. What's the play? Victor's jaw tightened. We wait for an opening. He's bound to slip up. Mira raised an eyebrow. And if he doesn't? Then we make one, Victor said, his tone leaving no room for argument. But as they moved through the crowd, mingling and keeping a low profile, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. From the shadows, a pair of cold, calculating eyes followed their every move. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Victor's pulse quickened as he and Mira wove through the opulent crowd, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses masking the tension simmering just beneath the surface. The chandelier above bathed the room in golden light, but Victor couldn't shake the chill running down his spine. He wasn't just here to play defense. This was his chance to take control of the game, but one wrong move and everything could spiral into chaos. Eyes up, Mira murmured under her breath, her lips barely moving as she leaned against the bar. Darius just made a move toward the back room. Private. Victor nodded slightly, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing server to maintain appearances. Stay close, but don't follow too soon, he whispered, his tone calm despite the storm brewing inside him. Mira smirked, her crimson lips curling into a faint grin. Subtlety isn't your strong suit, is it? Victor ignored her and began making his way toward the velvet-curtained doorway at the far end of the hall. A guard stood posted, his expression stoic, but Victor's confidence never wavered. He handed off his glass to another server and strode toward the man like he belonged there. Private area, the guard said gruffly, his hand raising to block Victor's path. Victor tilted his head, his voice low and firm. I'm here to speak with Mr. Langford. He'll want to hear what I have to say. The guard's eyes narrowed, but before he could protest, the curtain was pulled back, revealing Darius himself. Let him through, Darius said smoothly, his gravelly voice carrying an air of authority. He stepped aside, his sharp gaze locking onto Victor. The room beyond was dimly lit, the walls lined with dark wood and heavy drapes that muffled the sounds of the party outside. A long table dominated the space, scattered with papers, cigars, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Victor, Darius greeted, gesturing to an empty chair. I'll admit, I didn't expect to see you tonight, though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. You've always been bold. Victor didn't sit. Instead, he remained standing, his hands in his pockets, his stance casual but deliberate. Boldness runs in the family, doesn't it? He replied, his tone cold. Darius chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Still sharp-tongued, I see. But tell me, what brings you here? Surely you didn't come to reminisce? Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping. I know what you've been doing. The ambush, the deals, the sabotage, you've been dismantling my family's empire piece by piece. And now you're coming after me. Darius's smile faded, his expression hardening. You give me too much credit, Victor. If your father's empire is crumbling, it's because of the cracks he built into it. Not me. Don't lie to me, Victor snapped, his calm facade breaking for a moment. I trusted you. My father trusted you. And you stabbed us in the back. Darius rose from his chair, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the room. Your father trusted the wrong people, he said, his voice low and menacing. And now you're making the same mistake. Before Victor could respond, the sound of a scuffle outside the door drew both their attention. A muffled grunt was followed by the unmistakable crack of bone, and the door burst open. Mira stepped in, her dress slightly torn and her breathing heavy. Behind her, the guard lay unconscious on the floor. Sorry to interrupt, she said, brushing her hair back and giving Victor a pointed look. Things were getting a little too quiet out here. Darius's eyes narrowed as he took in Myra's disheveled state. You brought backup, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Victor smirked, his confidence returning. What can I say? I like to keep things interesting. Darius's expression darkened, and for a moment, the room was deathly silent. Then, with a sharp motion, he reached into his jacket. But Mira was faster. Her hand shot out, drawing her concealed weapon and leveling it at Darius before he could act. "Not tonight, old man," she said, her voice steady. Darius raised his hands slightly, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Impressive. You've chosen your allies well, Victor. But this changes nothing." Victor stepped forward, his tone icy. "Oh, it changes everything. I'm not here to plead or negotiate, Darius. I'm here to end this." Darius's smile turned into a sneer. "You don't have the stomach for what it'll take to win this game, Victor. You never did." Victor's eyes burned with fury, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We'll see about that." The tension in the room was razor-sharp, and it was clear that this confrontation was only the beginning. The war between Victor and Darius had just escalated, and there would be no turning back. Victor didn't waver, his glare fixed on Darius as the tension in the room thickened. Myra's steady aim didn't falter, her gun trained on the man who had once been like family to Victor. "You've played this game for a long time," Victor said coldly, stepping closer. "You've manipulated, betrayed, and dismantled everything my family built. But tonight, the rules change." Darius chuckled, his hands still raised. "You think this ends here? You think pointing a gun at me puts you in control?" His eyes flicked to Mira. "Your little stunt doesn't scare me, sweetheart." "Good," Mira replied dryly. "I wasn't going for scared. I was going for shut up." Victor's lips twitched into a smirk, but his tone remained icy. "You're done, Darius. Whatever you've been planning, it's over." Darius lowered his hands slowly, his gaze sharp and calculating. "You've got guts, Victor, I'll give you that. But you don't understand the bigger picture. I'm not just coming for you. I'm coming for everything your family ever stood for. Your empire, your name, your legacy. All of it." Victor clenched his fists. "Why? Why betray us? You were my father's most trusted ally." Darius leaned against the table, his grin turning vicious. "Trusted? That's where your father went wrong. Trust is a weakness. Your family built an empire on lies and exploitation, and I was nothing more than a tool to keep it running. But I'm not a tool anymore." Victor stepped forward, his voice rising. "So, this is about revenge? Destroying everything because you felt slighted?" Darius's smirk deepened. "It's not revenge. It's justice. And you, Victor, are just collateral damage." Before Victor could respond, Mira cut in. "We're wasting time. Either we get what we came for, or we walk out and leave him for the authorities." Darius barked a laugh. "Authorities? You think they scare me? I've got half the city in my pocket. And as for you two," he straightened, his expression turning deadly. "You won't make it out of here alive." The words had barely left his mouth when the door to the private room burst open, and two armed men stormed in. Mira spun instinctively, firing a shot that struck one man in the shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. The second lunged at Victor, tackling him to the floor. The two grappled as Mira ducked behind the table, using it as cover while exchanging gunfire with more guards who flooded the room. Victor twisted beneath his attacker, landing a hard elbow to the man's jaw before rolling free. He grabbed a heavy crystal ashtray from the table and swung it with all his strength, knocking the man unconscious. "Mira!" Victor shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm a little busy here," she called back, firing another shot that narrowly missed Darius, who was retreating toward a hidden door at the back of the room. Victor's heart pounded as he scrambled to his feet. "He's getting away." "Then go," Mira yelled, reloading her weapon without missing a beat. Victor didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the hidden door, kicking it open with a force that echoed down the dimly lit corridor beyond. Darius was already halfway down the hall, his steps hurried but steady. "Darius!" Victor's voice boomed, his footsteps echoing as he sprinted after him. Darius glanced back, his expression a mix of anger and amusement. "Still chasing shadows, Victor. You'll never catch me." Victor's blood boiled as he pushed himself harder, closing the distance between them. His muscles burned, but he couldn't let Darius slip away. Not now. At the end of the corridor, Darius darted into a stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. Victor followed, his breath ragged but his determination unwavering. When he burst onto the rooftop, the cold night air hit him like a wall. Darius stood near the edge, his silhouette framed by the city skyline. "You really don't know when to quit," Darius said, his voice carrying over the wind. Victor stepped closer, his chest heaving. "This ends now." Darius laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "You still don't get it, do you? Even if you stop me, the damage is already done. Your family's empire is crumbling, and there's nothing you can do to save it." Victor shook his head, his eyes blazing. "You think I care about the empire? This isn't about money or power. It's about justice. For my father. For everyone you've betrayed." Darius's expression hardened, his hand reaching into his jacket. But Victor was faster. In a blur of motion, Victor lunged forward, grabbing Darius's wrist and twisting it. A gun clattered to the rooftop as the two men grappled, their struggle a brutal clash of strength and desperation. Darius threw a punch, but Victor ducked, driving his shoulder into Darius's chest and slamming him against the rooftop's edge. "You've lost," Victor growled, his voice low and dangerous. Darius sneered, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. "Maybe, but if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." With a sudden burst of strength, Darius shoved Victor back, sending him stumbling. But Victor recovered quickly, his resolve unshaken. "Not tonight," Victor said coldly, delivering a sharp blow to Darius's gut. The older man crumpled, gasping for air. Before Victor could press further, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Blue and red lights illuminated the rooftop as police vehicles surrounded the building below. Mira appeared at the rooftop door, her dress torn and her hair wild but her expression victorious. "Guess who called in backup?" she said, smirking. Victor stepped back, his chest rising and falling as he stared down at Darius. "It's over." Darius glared up at him, his voice a venomous hiss. "This isn't over, Victor." "Not by a long shot." Victor didn't reply. He turned and walked away as the police stormed the rooftop, their shouts filling the air. Mira joined him, her smirk softening into a satisfied smile. "You did it." Victor shook his head, his expression grim. "Not yet. This was just the beginning." As they descended the stairs, leaving the chaos behind, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that Darius's words held a grain of truth. The war wasn't over, it was just getting started. Victor stood in the shadowy stairwell, his breath steady but his mind racing. Mira trailed behind him, her footsteps light but deliberate. The adrenaline from the rooftop confrontation still coursed through his veins, but he knew this wasn't the end. It was just one battle in a much larger war. As they reached the ground floor, the scene outside was chaos. Police officers swarmed the building, some carting off Darius's men in handcuffs while others barked orders into their radios. Darius himself was being escorted into the back of a police vehicle, his face a mask of defiance. Mira nudged Victor with her elbow. "You think he's going to talk?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Not willingly. But it doesn't matter. He's not the only one pulling strings." Mira arched a brow. "You think there's someone bigger behind this?" Victor nodded, his gaze fixed on the flashing lights of the police cars. Darius was smart, but he's not the mastermind. Someone else is driving this, and they won't stop just because he's in custody. Mira sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Great. So what now? We keep playing cat and mouse until you're either dead or broke." Victor smirked faintly, though there was no humor in it. "Not this time. It's time to go on the offensive." The days that followed were a whirlwind of strategy and execution. Victor worked tirelessly, poring over every scrap of information Isabella had dug up, while Mira handled security and logistics. Their operation wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about dismantling the web of corruption and betrayal that had nearly destroyed him. Through sleepless nights and tense discussions, they uncovered a deeper conspiracy. Darius had been working under the direction of a shadowy figure known only as the Broker, a faceless entity with ties to black market dealings, corporate espionage, and political influence. Isabella confirmed the lead with a sardonic grin. You're stepping into some seriously dangerous territory. The broker isn't just a player. They're the whole game. Victor's eyes darkened. Then we take the game away from them. Their search for the broker led them to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. The location was nothing special on the surface, but Isabella's intel revealed it to be a hub for illegal dealings, serving as a meeting point for the broker's associates. Victor, Mira, and a small team of loyal allies stormed the factory under the cover of night. The air was thick with tension as they moved through the labyrinth of rusted machinery and dimly lit corridors. Keep your eyes open, Mira whispered, her weapon drawn. If this place is as important as Isabella says, they won't leave it unguarded. She was right. They encountered resistance, armed guards patrolling the perimeter, their movements precise and disciplined. But Victor's team was prepared. The clashes were brief but brutal, and soon, they reached the heart of the facility. Inside, they found a room lined with monitors, each screen displaying a different piece of the puzzle. Financial transactions, encrypted messages, surveillance footage. And at the center of it all was a sleek desk, its surface immaculate except for a single laptop. Victor approached cautiously, his pulse pounding. He opened the laptop, his fingers flying over the keys as he navigated the encrypted files. What are you looking for? Mira asked, standing guard by the door. A name, a face, something to expose the broker, Victor replied, his voice tense. After what felt like an eternity, he found it. A file buried deep in the system, labeled simply Identity. Victor opened it, his breath hitching as the image loaded. The face that appeared on the screen was one he recognized immediately. Margot, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Mira frowned, stepping closer. Who's Margot? Victor's hands tightened into fists. She's my father's sister, my aunt. She's the last person I ever expected to see behind this. Myra's eyes widened. Your own family? Victor nodded, his mind racing. She was always ambitious, but she's been orchestrating everything. The sabotage, the betrayals. It was all her. Mira let out a low whistle. Well, that's a twist. Confronting Margot wasn't easy. She was as cunning as she was ruthless, and she didn't go down without a fight. But Victor had learned from his past mistakes. This time he was 2 steps ahead. With the evidence he'd uncovered, he exposed her network to the authorities, dismantling her operations piece by piece. Margot's fall was swift and decisive, her allies abandoning her as the weight of her crimes came crashing down. But even as she was led away in handcuffs, her parting words lingered in Victor's mind. You think this is over? She hissed, her eyes burning with defiance. This empire you're trying to rebuild, it'll never stand. You're just like your father, and you'll fail just like he did. Victor watched her go, her words a distant echo as the chaos settled around him. Weeks later, Victor stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city sprawling out before him. The battle had been won, but the scars it left behind were deep. Mira joined him, a glass of whiskey in hand. So what now? You've taken down the bad guys, reclaimed your name. Is this where you ride off into the sunset? Victor chuckled softly, though his expression was pensive. Not quite. There's still work to do. My father's legacy, it's not just about power or money. It's about rebuilding something stronger, something better. Mira raised her glass. Here's to doing things the hard way. Victor clinked his glass against hers, a small smile tugging at his lips. Here's to doing things the right way. As the city lights glittered around them, Victor knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Because this time, he wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to build something worth standing for.